You are listening to Our Stories Matter, brought to you by Trauma Informed LA. Our Stories Matter presents Season 5, We Will Dance Again. This season, Dr. Mary Barr Halpern, Director of the Intensive Outpatient Program at the Boston Child Study Center and lecturer at Harvard Medical School, and I'm Susie Hess, Associate Professor of Practicum Education at USC Suzanne Dorick Peck School of Social Work and co-founder of Trauma Informed LA, share our experiences of witnessing a mosaic of trauma and resilience during war. We joined an academic solidarity mission to Israel alongside 30 faculty members from Stanford, Harvard, Dartmouth, and a group of Italian activists. In this season, we will interview Jews, Arabs, and Christians to share their tapestry of hope and resilience during times of war. Our hope is to foster compassion, understanding, and knowledge about trauma and post-traumatic growth. So today we are welcoming Rawan Osman, who is a Syrian-Lebanese German activist advocating for peace with Israel. She previously served on the executive committee at PeaceComs and as a speaker at Sharaka NGO. Currently, she is studying Islamic and Jewish studies at Heidelberg University and is the founder of ArabsAsk. Additionally, Osman serves as the chairwoman of PostOctober7 in her role with PeaceComs. She documented cases of persecution of activists and political dissidents in the Arab world advocating for normalization with Israel. She organized speaking tours promoting the Abraham Accords and facilitated the participation of professionals and academics in Arab countries in a Holocaust education program. Wow. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy that we're chatting today. I hope that the people will learn that not the entirety of the Arab world wishes death upon the Jews.
I appreciate that, beyond. Which is why Mary and I wanted to have the podcast to really focus on all voices coming together in solidarity with the hopes to dismantle the polarization, especially happening on campuses. So wondering if we could maybe start from the beginning, if you could tell us where you were on October 7th.
I was at home in Germany, and that morning I did not want to switch my phone on. Something felt off. I have this relationship with Jews and Judaism since I understood that they are the most misunderstood people on the planet, and I felt that I have a family crisis. I had to travel, and I wrote an email lying, saying I have a family crisis. And on Saturday morning, when I switched my phone on, I saw the news, and I was frozen for 2 hours. I still hope that I'm wrong, but that morning, I told my son that they would never dare do what they've done, record it and share it, unless this was meant to last for long and to expand beyond Israel and Gaza.
This is so strong what you're saying and how you're describing it as well, because the freezing reaction, the kind of fight, flight, freeze. So when I opened the phone on October 7th, I was having a freezing moment of what the hell is happening right now? Kind of that fear that just shuts you down to the pit of my stomach. And then starting making all the phone calls to all the families and to think that, people from literally across the world having that similar traumatic reaction, I think, again, emphasize how at the core, we're all human beings and fear and trauma touch all of us.
I think I can imagine that the shock of the Israelis and the Jews around the world was different. I'm not going to say bigger or smaller. Let's not relativize. But my shock was a bit different from yours because it's been years that I tried to raise the sense of urgency. I grew up in this part of the world. And when I say some Arabs, if they could, they would eat them, the Israelis alive. And in Europe, people always shrugged and looked at me like, what is this tendency for melodrama in the Middle East? What is wrong with you people? And I meant it literally. And I was confronted with that scenario. And I wasn't glad, I told you so. I told you this could happen. even I didn't imagine that this can happen because I trusted the Israelis could prevent it. But then there is a slight difference between my reaction and yours, is that I could understand what was said in the videos that were shared when Hamas shared the early footage using their GoPro cameras, and that was spread, shared across the globe in Arabic. So people had context. And I was thinking, my God, God forbid, but if I was a mom and I saw my kid, I don't understand what's being said. Where is this happening? What is he told? And that's when my initial reaction was to contact someone I know at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel. And I said, send it my way, I'll translate it. And she said, no, but it's too graphic. I told her I grew up in the Middle East. I have thick skin, share it. That was an event. This is why, as you mentioned, we started an association, and I insisted we call it PostOctober7. Like, why choose such an ugly date? Because I think, personally, the world changed.
So when you said the world changed, what changed within you that you decided to start speaking up? Well, not even start. Clearly you have been, but to continue to speak out during this time. And what has that been like for you as an Arab?
First, before October 7th, I would never accept when people describe me using the word Arab. I raised my son, he doesn't speak a word of Arabic. And as I learned from my grandmother, we are not Arabs in the Levant. Our culture is an Arab culture. Our region was Arabized, like Northern Africa. Iran is Islamized, but not Arabized. So I wanted to, this is my space, and I wanted to make the distinction. I come from the Levant, I'm not an Arab. After October 7th, when people insist on describing me as the Arab traitor, and I substitute traitor for Zionist, and very proud of it. Before that, I wouldn't rub it in people's faces, especially if you want to work with professionals or academics, journalists coming from the Arab world. We looked for moderate voices, people who are open to allow the Israelis to tell their own story, instead of you, any Arab, learning about the Israelis who you've never met, you've never spoken to, from the curriculum, from the extremists, whatever the state wants you to believe. So whenever we found someone who's willing to accompany us to go to Auschwitz, to feel sympathy for the Jew, and I wasn't fond of the strategy, but it's effective because we tried to humanize the Jew, to humanize the Israeli. And I thought, okay, if these projects exist, especially after the historic signing of the Abraham Accords, then why not? I do my best. And I was invested, although I wasn't really convinced with that strategy. People asked me, people I worked with on delegations and stuff, to take the Star of David off, not to share my true feelings with Israelis. Let's not push people away, and then you will get discredited. If people know you're so fond of Judaism and the Israelis, you'll be discredited. And I played along sometimes. After October 7th, on that day, I still feel the same anger. I switched to fighter mode, and this has been consistent. I had zero idea. I didn't use social media. My son used to say, you're a dinosaur. Whenever I needed any help, even with Facebook, because that's what I had for the last 15 years or so, I would ask my son. But watching what happened on the news, even before Israel reacted, people didn't realize the scale of the attack. The world started condemning Israel. The Arab world, started denying that civilians were targeted. And that absurdity filled me with so much anger. I just used my phone, downloaded TikTok, and started I didn't have a mic. I didn't care about the light, about the audio, about the length, about the message. I was just frustrated, a very angry mother speaking to the world. Now, when people started following me, I thought, yep, let's do this professionally. Found a team of social media strategists. We partnered, and we've been doing that. I'm perceived as the traitor, but believe me, I could not care less. Because if you tell me, thank you for speaking up, I wish I could say the same. People say this from Tehran, from Iran. And that confirms to me that what we're doing, although we are a tiny minority, is important work.
Oh, you have no idea. I mean, the tiny minority is sometimes what gets me going in the morning, knowing that not the whole world hate us, and that there are people like you that are fighting the fight and not being afraid. That's huge. Because I mean, there's one thing when it's coming from, kind of like my community, right? So Israelis, we tend to be resilient and we're going to push through and we're going to fight. It's kind of like in our blood. When there's someone else who is an ally who says, I will not be a bystander, I would be an outstander, I will be there with you. That makes a whole world of a difference. And, you're talking about being a mom. And I think that, again, like that core feeling of need to help and really get it and understanding the pain and the need to fight. Thank you for being that vocal minority.
I will tell you what I tell Israelis on the streets very often. There is nothing to thank me for. I can't imagine that I would have to reach out and ask you for help if my daughter was kept in Gaza for 10 months. I would be infuriated, like, what is wrong with you people? What is wrong with you? You've seen what happened, right? And that is not to say, I love it when journalists challenge me. Do you not see what's happening in Gaza? I'm not blind. I'm not stupid. And I do have internet. Of course I see what's happening. And it's not something to celebrate. And it's not like you asked for it. Here you go. You got it. No. I also thought about it when I was watching the first videos of soldiers being dragged into Gaza. Even then, without knowing what happened to children, to the elderly, without knowing that, I was thinking, if I was a mother waking up in Gaza, seeing this, even if just 10 soldiers were kidnapped, I knew exactly what's going to happen to my house, to my children. Because this is one thing Israel is always consistent and clear about. You don't, even if you kidnap one 18-year-old soldier, we don't joke about it so that they don't take it lightly. Even if it's one person, you're going to pay dearly. They knew that. So still, despite knowing and having experience with that, look at what happened to the Lebanese infrastructure in 2006 when Hezbollah killed some soldiers and kidnapped a few. It's not a joke. And nevertheless, the wise leadership of Hamas thought, what a brilliant plan. We planned it for years. We have the know-how. We have the money. We have the support. And here you go. They executed that genius plan, very well coordinated, respect. But what did they gain after that? One positive thing, although it's really bizarre to say that there was a positive outcome after October 7, is that we've seen, at least the naive and the blind and the far left has seen that this Palestinian the world tends to infantilize is not an infant after all. They're not incapable. If they could do this, if they had the resources and the skills to do that, it was time to treat them as an equal partner. So stop asking the world or the Israelis, what is going to happen in Gaza after the war? I don't know. It's not up to the Israelis to find a solution. All these bright Palestinian minds across the globe come together and present a comprehensive plan if you're serious about coexistence.
A lot of pushback, which is what's happening on college campuses. I mean, I've had this experience at USC. I've had the experience. I am an activist, and my friends who are activists who I've always advocated for and with, I thought would do the same thing for me now, which has not been the reality. And it doesn't matter if they're Jewish or not. I mean, I know Jewish advocates who have been incredibly anti-Semitic. So I'm curious of what strategies have you found to be the most effective in combating misinformation and the polarization?
Ask questions, and almost most of the time, you realize that people know very little about the conflict. And my strategy, I already shared, honestly, that I'm angry, so I have little tolerance. But when I feel patient, I always would like to part ways, agreeing to disagree, and begging of this person who doesn't know much about the conflict to go educate themselves, or even topics that we're not very knowledgeable about. We're entitled to have an opinion, but not a very strong opinion inciting violence when you don't know much. If you don't know why the conflict started, or if you just pick the date 1948 because you're parroting whoever hero champion you heard without really understanding the context, saying that the Israelis stole Palestine, that was always their strategy, conspiring, chasing people out. And you've never heard that around 800,000 Jews left the Arab world, leaving assets, possessions, properties, memories, legacies behind. I mean, if you don't know that, you've got some homework to do before accusing the Jews of wanting to drink Palestinian blood. Chill, let's leave those massive, horrible statements for a moment and study the region. When I say study the region, I'm not asking you to understand every perspective on both sides of the spectrum. But if you don't know where Israel is on the map, it's very difficult for me to have a conversation. But younger students who have more patience and who it's their future after all, they will have to live with this. They will have to, I don't know if they will have to always keep these relationships that are mostly broken on university campuses on the other side of the globe. Eventually, you will have to learn how to have this dialogue because it keeps happening in the Middle East. And it is one of the most volatile topics. If you are in any way affiliated with the Middle East, with the Jews, or with the Arabs, or with the Palestinians, we will have to have a deeper understanding if we're going to advocate for this side or that. I was on a plane between Boston and Atlanta, and I had a Black young American student near me who wanted to explain. He assumed I'm Israeli because I had documents with Hebrew writings on them, and he saw that we are a big delegation. He was explaining to me that the world knows why Israel is opted for this war in Gaza. I'm like, okay, why? He said, we all know you want access. You want access to water. You want the port in Gaza. He told me earlier that he's been to Tel Aviv. I'm like, dude, are you sure you've been to Tel Aviv? You know that the Israelis do have ports. And so this is so absurd. And the mission here, your task is relatively easy. Just ask questions and get them to realize that they don't have answers and they need to do their homework.
You know what's interesting about what you're saying? So I live outside of Boston right now. So obviously there's a ton of protest. And in one of the, so usually I try to avoid protest. My go-to is with activism in different ways because I know it's not my thing. But then it came to my home, right? So there was a protest like maybe 10 minutes from where I live. And I live in the suburbs, very quiet area, very diverse. And I was with my kids and my husband. Not my best moment. I'm putting it out there. I was totally emotional mind. And there was maybe, it was a small part. It's like 10 people older. There should have been probably all in their late 60s, holding signs, let Gaza leave, ceasefire now, Israel's committing genocide. And I felt my heart racing. And I was, like I said, I was with my kids and I had to say something. And, my son is reading it. He knows that there is a war. My son is 8.5. And I just felt I had to do something. So I went over and I asked one of the people who was holding this sign that was a ceasefire. I was like, ceasefire who? Because if you say ceasefire Hamas, I will stand with you. And he goes, no, ceasefire Israel. They're killing everybody. And I was trying to ask him questions, like you said, actually. Like, well, did you know that Hamas said no to a ceasefire? Do you know that Israel said yes? I could try all those questions. And the minute I started asking question, his response was, you're not educated enough about what's going on there. And then I lost it. I was like, I'm Israeli. I'm a little bit more educated than this random John Doe. And again, I shouldn't have done it in front of my kids, but I just felt like there's no one to speak with. And it's so hard because like you're saying, like you were sitting with that student who knows it all, but I feel like people do not want to be educated. And granted, protest is not the right place to have those conversations, in my opinion. Like people are already kind of like you're with a mob of people. There is a lot of dehumanization that's going on in protests. Probably not the best place to have that. But this dialogue, I feel like a lot of times, especially students, do not want to have this dialogue. So what do you do if they shut you down?
I also deal with Arab men who tell me to shush, to go read a book. Shut up, honey. Like they're always patronizing you, like, sweetheart, listen to me, like, sit down and listen. So that helps me be the person I am. I grew up in this part of the world, so I'm feisty and no, don't sweetheart me, please. I know what I'm talking about. I don't need to read a book. You just have to respect that I have an opinion, and I beg to differ. I don't know. You mentioned earlier, what do we do against the polarization trend we see across the globe? I don't think that people who are calling from the river to the sea and globalized intifada, they're not interested in a conversation. They think that they are championing the oppressed, and you are the oppressor, and you are those who support the Zionist entity. And that Zionist entity is Israel, who has one of the most sophisticated armies. The Jews have a lot of money. You've been historically known for plotting and conspiring. So you take a big pot and throw in it misconceptions, a lack of understanding of the history. Why did the Jews choose this part of the world? Why do the Jews feel this connection with this part of the world? How did Israel how did it come to existence? And they weren't playing solo. Like, the Arab is not a passive player in this game. The Israelis did not make first aliyah like the Israelis, forgive me. The Jews did not make the first aliyah, the second aliyah. And the Arab was like passively sitting, watching there. And then suddenly they said, okay, 1948, let's start. Now we declare our independence, and we need to chase those 700,000 Palestinians out. This is not what happened, but it seems that the understanding of this story is that simplistic. And then you add to it the very important element, anti-Semitic beliefs that people think are true. They still think, like Hamas claimed at the beginning, Khalid Mashal, at least one of their leaders, that what is happening is following a Talmudic conspiracy. He said it in Arabic, and I replayed it. I'm like, what is he talking about? Khalid Mashal, he's maybe in his 70s, and people listening to him think he's a millionaire, he's a leader, and he is a freedom fighter. He must know what he's talking about. And this is why I always tell them, a serious scholar of Judaism, they will spend more than 7 years if they are committed to studying the Talmud to have some understanding. But Khalid Mashal knows about the conspiracies in the Talmud. People are gullible or anti-Semitic, and they think they are standing on the side of the oppressed. And we have to keep reminding them, take a map. This is the big bad Jewish state. It is tiny. There's an ocean of Arab countries around it. And no, they do not seek to kill anybody. They do not enjoy warring with Hamas and Hezbollah and the axis of resistance, this evil alliance. They could invest their energy, their money, their talents into something more productive. And despite all the wars Israel has been through since it came to existence, it still excelled. It is still a remarkable project, this tiny country that contributed to the good of the world.
I appreciate so much what you're saying, and wondering, what can you recommend? Our hope is that universities will be using this podcast to develop, mutual understanding among students. And so what can you recommend for universities of how can that be done so that we can dismantle this polarization?
Perhaps now that we've seen that this problem in the Middle East is one of the most volatile and polarizing issues, I would suggest that there is enough skill, will, interest in the US, because that's where you're based, for universities, for academics, for experts to come together and develop, I'm not going to say a booklet, to include main points, to include various narratives, to highlight, to remind that the historian is a human being. And any historiographic project, the historian has to choose what to include, what to focus on, and what to exclude. So inevitably, there are several narratives, several layers, and we need to highlight key points so that people understand that even among Israelis, there are many different opinions, many different moments, key moments that are worth examining. You have to understand the psychology of Jews in the last century or two, but someone has to make a selection of key moments and to understand why are the Palestinians so adamant, so persistent in the fight against the Israelis? What happened there? These are my 2 cents. Develop something basic, a booklet, inclusive, for people to understand. Several narratives are legitimate, and we need to approach this topic with caution so that we avoid that it leads to new wars, continuous wars.
I love what you're saying because I think education is key. One of the things that we're trying to fight, at least in Massachusetts, and I think in other places around the US, is the K-12 education, that are trying to put a very specific narrative. And what I like about what you're saying is, again, hearing the voices and hearing the different perspective, hearing the pain of all. I agree with you. I think education and starting early is one of the most important things. Okay, I have a personal question, if you feel comfortable answering. So why, I mean, you were active even before October 7th, and I understand the anger, because I'm angry. What changed for you, let me go back. What made you become an activist in the first place? A champion for peace? Seeing the other side, even before October 7th, being able to hear all the voices as a Syrian-Lebanese, what got you into the cause of fighting?
I will tie my answer, with your last comment. You said education, the importance of education, and we should start at an early age. So I am one example who tells my story to Muslims, to Arabs who live in the West. If I learned when I was 12 that the Zionists are alien to the region, they came from Eastern Europe with the intention to steal Arab land, and they have expansionist aspirations. They will eat the entire region. Theodor Herzl is depicted as the most despicable personality. At an early age, you learn the Palestinians suffer, we suffer. All this misery is caused by these Zionists, with several books made available for less than $1. I bought Mein Kampf for less than $1. Mein Kampf, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. So you have a selection made available for you. Add to that another layer of anti-Semitism, at least at my school, and I attended a French Catholic school. Every Easter, we watched The Passion of the Christ, a traumatizing film. We spoke about it when we became older, like with my sisters, with my friends. Like, what on earth were they thinking? They bring the entire school together at the theater every year to watch a child-friendly film, very graphic. And what you conclude when leaving the theater, you look at the statue of Mary, baby Jesus, and you think, oh my God, the Jews killed baby Jesus. So you are bombarded with education, with educational material, making you think of the Jew as the devil. Now, I hated the Jews, and I didn't say it this way before October 7th, but I decided we needed clarity because we have to choose a side. I know that we need to fight polarization. Nevertheless, on October 7th, or since then, I know that we need to choose a side because we did not choose this confrontation. We didn't. It was orchestrated, it was organized for very long, and we're just dealing with the repercussions, with what was planned. So if I have to choose a side, I have to be clear. I was an anti-Semite. I am a recovered anti-Semite. I am a Zionist. I stand with the Jews because they are misunderstood. I stand with Israel. I come to Israel not in secret, in hiding, proudly, because this Jew in the world, the Jewish state, is the Jew in the world in the classroom. Speaking of education, and it's the small achiever, it's the student who excels, and the rest in this classroom are jealous. It's as simple as that. They know very little about this kid, but they know horrible stuff from their parents about the kid's parents. And this kid is constantly bullied. And after October 7th, I decide, no, thank you. I no longer watch what's happening indifferently, thinking, what is my voice going to change? Oh, it changes a lot. This is how I became vocal. And like me, many people who were in the beauty business, in academia, many were never vocal about their Jewish heritage, their Moroccan Jewish heritage. We became accidental activists because we cannot accept what's happening and the fact that Israel is condemned. And if you are a little intelligent, you don't have to be a genius. We've seen, I live in Germany, we've seen that Germany's reaction was excellent. We stand by the Israelis. But come on, let's do the math. We knew exactly what Hamas wanted. Israel cannot but retaliate. They have to. They owe it to their own people. And unless they show that they are adamant to restore order and safety for their own citizens and to try and return their hostages and even the bodies that were stolen, when this happens, we will witness a shocking toll of civilian casualties, exactly what Hamas wanted. Otherwise, they wouldn't be hiding in tunnels under their own family members. They leave their wives and their kids exposed while they hide. Unlike the Israelis, and the IDF is always compared to Hamas, this is not acceptable. The IDF or the Israeli government hides their citizens in bunkers, in safe rooms, and the IDF fights on the ground. When you see this happening, you do, or at least even in Germany, let's stick to this example, you know that the politicians will start experience pressure by these voters. Many of them are Arabs and Muslims or far left who are saying, when will you stop this massacre, this genocide? And soon we will have elections, and these voters are demanding of you that you stop sending weapons to the Israelis. Nothing has changed. This happened on October 7th. Nothing has changed. And the Israelis continue doing what they said they're going to do by weakening Hamas, dismantling this organization. But the world is standing and thinking, isn't it enough? Isn't it enough revenge? And it's not tit for tat. This is not how it works. I told some angry students once, they were shouting in the background. I took the mic and I said, they asked me about proportionate response. And it was maybe November. And I told them, what is proportionate response? How many IDF soldiers would you like us to send to Gaza to rape how many Palestinian women? My statement is disgusting, but this is what I understand when you talk about proportionate response, about tit for tat. This is not how it works.
Rawan, I hear your anger, and I'm with you. I'm wondering, and this is a question we also ask everybody, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper with that. So you mentioned that from the beginning, you were exposed to a lot of very raw material, understanding way more than people that do not speak Arabic, for example. How do you cope with it emotionally? And one of the questions we ask everybody is, what are you committing to do this week for your healing?
I realize that what we've seen and what I voluntarily saw and translated is scarring. I will never be the same person after what I've seen. I also felt compelled to come to Israel. I've never visited Israel prior to what happened because I knew once I come to Israel, I lose the right to ever return to Lebanon or Syria. So I hesitated in the last years, although I was studying and working with Israelis. After October 7th, I decided in a heartbeat, I give up the right to return anywhere where such an event was celebrated. Again, for the sake of clarity, of course, not every Syrian and Lebanese celebrated it. But if this is the official stance, they asked for it, they deserve it. No, thank you. If I miss the Middle East, I feel at home in Israel. And I met parents who lost their kids, and I met parents who have children in Gaza, abducted children. And if I compare my pain to theirs, it is nothing. This is why I don't urge people to go watch the material, but I think if people went through it, then we owe them at least to learn their story. You could read about it, you could listen to it, you don't have to see what happened, but we owe them at least that. Especially that this is not just about Israel. This is an attack against modernity, against Western values by a group of people, a very large group of people who opt to choose extremism. Let's call it political Islam, let's call it extremism among Muslims, but it's a trend. And let's stop ignoring the elephant in the room. The problem has become so big, you cannot fit it under the carpet anymore. We have to talk about extremism stemming from Islam. The Muslims have to understand you need a reform. Christianity went through it. Polygamy was allowed in Judaism. We move on. We come to this day and age. We need a movement of reformists. We need to emancipate the moderate voice among Muslims, bring these voices together. If we were to have a chance against this barbarism, if we want to preserve our Western values, modernity, what we collectively achieved around the world. It is at risk. This is why this is not just about Israel. Israel is left to spearhead this fight against extremism, against barbarism, and we need to join. We cannot stand indifferent, passively on the side, because sooner or later, this will catch up, as we've seen in Europe, in the US, in Southern America, in Australia, in New Zealand. It's about time we woke up and tried to do something. What I will do this week is quite simple. This week, this period, I came to Israel for the first time, and I brought my son with me. I tried everything possible to explain to someone who grew up in a sterile environment, someone who is a teenager who, like me, is an idealist. I used to be an idealist, and I understood also from the Torah that evil is objective. And sometimes, in order to achieve peace, you have to fight. Sometimes we need a war to restore order. It sounds absurd, especially for our young children who want us to just love one another. I wish it was that easy. So what I'm doing is I'm experiencing Tisha B'Av with my son in this country to see how a nation, people, communities experience atrocities and they recover. You experience destruction and you rebuild. You never lose hope in goodness, in positivity. This is what we're going to do. We're going to hug each other. We're going to stand with Israelis and we're going to tell one another, Yeh Beseder, everything will be good. We will have enough time to heal, to recover after this war is over. B'ezrat Hashem.
Oh my gosh, I love your voice. And, your healing is doing with community. And I love your words of accidental activist, because I've always been an activist, not for my own community, for different communities. And I feel like I accidentally became an activist for my own community without ever thinking that was going to be an intentional decision. So I appreciate you actually giving me clarity of my own narrative. And what the last question that we ask everyone is, what was it like for you to tell your story today?
I see smiling faces and I feel your energy. People might think, this is a bit crazy, but I feel positive energy, which I don't feel all the time. It doesn't mean, again, I'm not comparing, but there are times where I feel pain, shared trauma. It depends on who am I talking to. And I reached a point where I stopped giving interviews because I thought, first, who am I? Why are you asking me questions? Like when people ask me, what's going to happen in Gaza after the war? Why are you asking me? Go ask a Palestinian, go ask a Gazan, go ask an expert. But I also thought I'm always repeating the same things and it becomes boring. And then I realized when I see a young student, someone wrote to me, said, my kids, they weren't children, they were university students. They wanted to drop out of university. That was in the US. And after you spoke to them, they changed their mind. And I realized that our voice now, it's not ours. Our power, our energy, our money, whatever we can contribute, it's not ours. We owe it to these people if we feel that way. So I started giving interviews again, and I realized that the energy is affected by the persons I'm conversing with. And this is why this time today, it was different because we are focusing on something else. We don't want to expose anti-Semitism in the Arab world, for example. The focus here was how do we reach a dialogue or the possibility for a dialogue? How we fight, combat polarization? We didn't find extraordinary answers, but I'm pretty sure that every conversation changes us and those we speak to, sometimes in ways we cannot put our finger on, So thank you so much for your smiles, for your energy, for what you share with me, whether it's like a feeling or a thought, and what you don't share with me. If I understood correctly, I'm just reading your faces. You didn't say much. I didn't give you much chance to speak. But it's again a proof that across the globe, you are on the other side of the planet, and we share similar experience.
Rawan, thank you for rebuilding hope. I really thank you for that. What you said is so profound. And this, like you said, some episodes, you just feel the energy. We just met and you're not leaving my heart. So thank you.
It's my pleasure.
I am so grateful for you on so many levels. And right when you started, Mary sent me a message saying she's just so beautiful. And you're beautiful inside and out. And I think you give voice to so many people who may be afraid to come out and say that they were anti-Semitic and they were able to sort of navigate and have dialogues and learn and educate and self-educate. And yeah, you're just so incredibly brave. And I hope we can meet in person sometime because you're a beautiful human being inside and out.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank our listeners, music composer Jonathan Bargiora, sound designer Ivan Reyes, podcast advisor Donna Fazari, and special thanks to the Academic Engagement Network for their generous support. Today's episode is co-produced by Professor Susie Hess and Dr. Miri Bar Halprin. Our Stories Matter, We Will Dance Again is brought to you by Trauma Informed LA. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram and at our website at traumainformedla.org. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes so more folks can have access and donate to traumainformedla.org so we can keep recording and healing through our storytelling episodes.